I wanted to start today by telling you about, a lot of people know about this. It's a very famous, in terms of archaeology, it's very famous, and biblical archaeology, but a lot of people may not know about this piece that was found in Jordan, which in the ancient times was Moab. In 1868, there was a French archaeologist that was excavating there and found this, what's now called the Moabite stone, or the Mesha Stela. And it's named that because King Mesha of Moab had this inscribed. And it's a long inscription, and it dates from, they think, about 840 BC. So in the Bible school, when we're talking about King Ahab, it's around this time that this was, that this was written down, that this was inscribed. And it mentions King Mesha, who's mentioned in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 3. It mentions Omri, who's an Israelite king in the Bible. It has the biblical name for God on it, the YHWH, that we think must pronounced Yahweh. It mentions Chemosh, the Moabite god that's mentioned in the Bible, and it probably mentions the house of David. Some people dispute whether these words on here means house of David or if it's referring to somebody else. But this was a really important discovery because before that time, in the early to mid-1800s, and even going back to the 1700s and 1600s, the most educated scholars of history and philosophy would have told you that the stories in the Bible are fictional. The stories in the Old Testament are fictional. And in fact, the more aggressive ones, like Thomas Paine, believed that and wrote that the stories in the Old Testament were made up in order to preserve power. The priests and the kings made up these stories and said, believe in these, in order to preserve their power, or at least to people believed that they were made up to teach spiritual lessons, but they weren't real. And then they find this piece, this stone, this inscription that has all these names from our Old Testament in it, and it made people realize these are real stories, these are real people, things that happened, and it just makes it seem a lot more real when I read these old stories. We're going to go into the time of King Ahab, who was the son of Omri, and what I'd like to do is explore and excavate some of the stories from this time period. And so we're going to be in 1 Kings. We're going to start in 1 Kings chapter 16 today, if you want to turn there. We're going to read quite a bit from the end of chapter 16 and chapter 17. And we have one of our greatest biblical heroes that appears in this time named Elijah the prophet, okay? And King Ahab was the king at this time. So I attempt to set the scene of what's going on here. Ahab was the son of Omri, who's mentioned in this Moabite stone, which is really cool. And Ahab was the 7th king of Israel after Solomon. And he began to reign about 60 years after King Solomon. So if we think about 60 years ago here, that would be Lyndon B. Johnson as president. So we're thinking, how, to some of us, that's like ancient history. To some of us, it's like yesterday. But so that's how far removed we are from King Solomon. The most powerful king in Israel's history. And so we're going to pick up the story in 1 Kings chapter 16, verses 25 and 26 talk about this king Omri. And they say, Omri did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did more evil than all who were before him. For he walked in all the way of Jeroboam son of Nebat, and in the sins that he caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. This figure, Jeroboam son of Nebat, if we don't know who that is, he was I can't say the first king, I guess the second king after King Solomon. So Solomon's son became king of Israel, but 10 of the tribes followed this fellow, Jeroboam son of Nebat, instead of Solomon's son, for various reasons that you can read about in 1 Kings 10 and 11, I think. But Jeroboam becomes a king of Israel, and the southern tribe of Judah and Benjamin with them become the kingdom of Judah. So we're split in two at that time. And Jeroboam, son of Nebat, is credited with introducing idolatry to Israel and idol worship to Israel. So he has that dubious distinction. And so when it says he walked in all the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, it means he's continuing this idol worship. Very evil in the sight of the Lord, of course. And so in 1 Kings 16, verse 30, we have Ahab. So it says Omri did more evil than all who were before him. And then in verse 30, we have Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he took as his wife Jezebel, daughter of King Ethbaal of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Samaria was the capital of Israel. Ahab also made a sacred pole, or an Asherah pole. Ahab did more to provoke the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than had all the kings of Israel who were before him. And so we see evil upon evil, more evil, descending into more evil, from father to son. We have, if you leave sugar or some food outside, you're going to attract ants, you're going to attract, other type of bugs. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, when we have really evil things descending into really evil, it attracts prophets. That's kind of how I picture it. The prophets start coming out, and they start prophesying against the king. And that's exactly what happens here as we continue in chapter 17. So here's where we get into our story for today. And this is the first place that Elijah appears. He comes out of Gilead. He kind of just comes out of nowhere. He doesn't have an origin story, at least not in the Bible. So this is where he appears in 1 Kings 17, verse 1. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." The word of the Lord came to him, saying, "Go from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. But after a while the wadi dried up, because there was no rain in the land. There's actually some archaeological evidence for severe droughts during this same time also. So this is rooted in real history, in real story here. We know, even if people that don't believe in the Bible can look back and know, during this time of King Ahab, or the house of Omri, Omri's dynasty, Ahab being Omri's son, there were periods of severe drought. And even we today know when there's a drought, it gets bad for the farmers. We have a buffer that a lot of us don't experience it, because food still seems to come to the grocery store. But back then, can you imagine, for years, no rain, no dew, nothing. People are starving. People can't get food. They can't get water. It's very, very bad. It would be basically one of the worst things that could happen to society. Verse 8. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Elijah, saying, "Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow there to feed you." So he set out and went to Zarephath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel, so that I may drink." As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." But she said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks, so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. She went and did as Elijah said, so that she, as well as he and her household, ate for many days. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. So I have an observation, or a few observations from this. This is part one of the story. We're going to continue. There's kind of a part two coming up next. I noticed the obedience of the Zarephath widow. Even when she didn't even have enough for herself and for her son, she gave some to the prophet. Can you imagine being in this position? She and her son are about to die. Seems like she's kind of made peace with it, right? I have just this little bit left. We're going to eat it and die. I don't even have enough to feed my own family. But she gives some first to the prophet. In Luke 4:25 and 26, Jesus mentions this story and this widow. Luke 4, Jesus is in his hometown of Nazareth, and this is the part where he says no prophet is ever accepted in his hometown. And to kind of make this point, in verse 25, well, starting 24, and he said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon." Jesus implying to me that the widow was saved because of her faith when faith was lacking in Israel. Keep that in mind as we go to part 2. Back in 1 Kings 17. Now we're going to pick up in verse 17. Chapter 17, verse 17. After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. Then she said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." But he said to her, "Give me your son." He took him from her bosom, carried him up into the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I'm staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." The Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." Now I know. Here's my observation from part 2 of the story. The widow says, "Now I know that you are a man of God and that the truth of the Lord is in your mouth." After she obeyed Elijah's word when they were at the brink of death, her belief when she says in the story, when she says, "Now I know, and now I believe that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth, and now I know that you're a man of God," her belief came after her obedience. Obedience before knowledge is faith. That's my opinion. The more I was listening to a Kenny Chesney song, and this is how I kind of feel about myself when he says, "I'm too old to be living young and free, but I'm too young to be over the hill." Okay, so that's where I am. I'm not real young anymore, but I'm not old yet. But the more I live and experience things, experience life, and the more I read and contemplate and pray, the more I think that faith and obedience are the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. Faith is not belief in terms of I know in my head and acknowledge some sort of truth. Faith is trust and obedience. I think faith is obedience before I have the knowledge, before I really even have the belief. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen," or the reality of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We don't know yet, we have not seen yet, but we believe enough to obey. So I'm really inspired by that widow of Zarephath. She believed at least enough to obey when it did not make sense. She says at the end of the story, "Now I know." She didn't know when she obeyed. I think of my grandpa teaching me to play golf when I was a little guy, and I can still picture it out in the field. There's a toll road, highway, freeway that goes through that field now. But when I was a kid, we were there and we had our golf balls in this field, and I can picture the chain link fence and the neighborhood, and we were out there, and I was probably 6, maybe 7 years old, and I was trying to hit that ball, and I wanted to hit it a long way. So I'm swinging as hard as I can, and I played, if I was 7, I was playing Little League Baseball. And so I'm, swinging, I see the people swinging, and I'm, trying to hit that thing, and my grandpa, and it's not going well, right? Because I'll hit it over there, I'll hit on top of the ball, I'll hit whatever. And my grandpa tells me, the easier you swing, the farther the ball will go. And I said, "Yeah, right, Grandpa. There's no way. That makes no sense. But you know what? I tried it. And you know what? The ball went farther. And there's reasons for that. But I think of that as being faith, because it made no sense. I did not believe it. I still remember that, all these years later. I can picture him saying that. The easier you hit that ball, the farther it's going to go. And I said, there's no way. I did not believe it, but I did it. And then it worked. And the ball went farther. Why? Because he was wiser than I am. He had more knowledge than I did, more experience. It reminds me also, we can go back to the book of Luke. Look at this story in Luke chapter 5. Right after this, Nazareth episode where they try to throw Jesus off a cliff because no prophet is accepted in their hometown. Then in the next chapter, we're in Luke chapter 5. And I'm going to start in verse 4. Jesus is on Simon's boat, teaching the people. And Simon is the person who he's going to rename Peter, one of the apostles. And he's put out a little bit so he can teach the people from the boat, the crowd of people from the boat. And then we have this in verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, we will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. It's not when they believed that Jesus' words were true. It's when they did it, when they let down their nets, they caught so much fish that their nets were breaking. In fact, I think, this is my opinion, there's no way that Simon actually believes that this is going to work. I don't think. The way he answers, look at how he answers. "Master, we've worked all night long, have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, we'll let down the nets." It's like, okay, Grandpa, if you say so, almost like I'm going to prove him wrong. Like, okay, I'll swing easier. If you say so, you say that when you don't believe this is going to work. But he did it. He obeyed. And he calls him Master, which means you say and I do. He's obeying. And then we have the miracle. In my case, the miracle was the ball actually going somewhere. Perhaps faith is actually doubt in a way. I doubt my own senses, what I'm seeing and hearing and touching. I guess I could name all 5 senses. But I doubt my own senses and I doubt my own wisdom just enough to obey. I trust him, whoever it is that's telling me to do something, more than I trust me. So we see how humility comes into play here with faith. I think of this metaphor. Picture this. You're standing in front of, and you see this in movies from time to time, you're standing in front of a rickety old bridge over a big old canyon or chasm or whatever. You can't make yourself believe that the rickety old bridge is going to hold you up. You can't make yourself really believe that based on what you see, but you can choose to step onto it. That's faith. Now, let's add this to the little metaphor. So you're standing in front of the rickety old wooden bridge, and now there's a person there telling you, go ahead and go across. It'll be fine. And this is a random stranger. Does that make you more likely to want to step onto the bridge? Or think, the person standing with you that says, go ahead and go across, it's okay, is Patrick Morrissey, the governor of West Virginia. Maybe I trust that a little bit more than a random stranger, because, okay, this is someone who's an authority figure. He has knowledge that I don't have. What if it's President Trump? Donald Trump is standing there with you, telling you in his blue suit and red tie and all this, and he's in the little American flag pin, and he tells you, go ahead, go across the bridge, it's going to be fine. He has a lot more authority, he has a lot more knowledge than I have, right? He has intelligence and knowledge, I think. Now, what if it's a structural engineer standing there telling you, go ahead and step on the bridge and go across, it's okay, it'll be fine. What if I'm standing there, what if it's my grandpa telling me, go ahead? Are we getting a picture of the feeling that these different people telling me, the person that's telling me to do the thing makes a difference. It makes a difference who it is, doesn't it? What if it's your spouse, your husband or wife, saying, go ahead and go? Well, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. That could go one way or the other, depending on your relationship with your spouse. It makes a difference who is telling you to do the thing. Maybe I don't trust the bridge, but maybe I trust the person who's telling me that it's going to be okay. If Jesus was standing there with me telling me to go across the bridge, I'm going to step on the bridge, right? Because he has all the authority, all the wisdom, all the intelligence. And so I can trust him. Sometimes people follow Jesus. They step onto the bridge and the bridge collapses and they fall to their death. Jesus called people into situations where it's not safe, where it's dangerous, where people had to give up their lives, go through suffering. Jesus says it's okay. Paul writes about that at the end of his life. He says, I know, he tells Timothy, I'm going to be poured out as a drink offering. He knows he's about to die. And then just a little bit later in the same letter, he writes, I know the Lord will carry me safely home. He trusts that Jesus is going to take care of him, even if it doesn't turn out safely. It doesn't turn out the way we think we want it to. So, we should give to God, thinking back about this story, really, our story that we're considering today in the Zarephath widow. We should give to God what worldly wisdom would say is foolish. Money, our time, our energy, even if it's in short supply. I mean, what is obedience? What is obedience to God today? What is obedience to Christ today? Believe in Jesus, trust in him, and love one another. That's 1 John 3:23. Or love God and love others, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. Think about that widow. What more loving thing could someone do than to give up her last meal that was for her and her son? I'll tell you what someone could do that's even more. John chapter 15, verse 13. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. John 15, 12 through 17, this whole section where Jesus says that to his disciples. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant doesn't know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. Jesus said these words to his 12 apostles. The message was faith, being obedience, and love. So I'd suggest to you that you won't experience the abundance until you're on the other side of obedience. The widow, she and her son were saved through obedience. Keep loving. Keep giving. We should be giving until we don't think we have any more to give, and then keep giving. After all, what is love? The godly love, the love of God in the New Testament, in the Greek language, was agape. It used to sometimes be translated as charity. In the King James Version, 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, it's charity. Because love is about giving, like we think of charity. Love is about giving to someone else's needs. If you're in a dry season, maybe spiritually or physically or whatever, continue to be obedient even when you're in a spiritual or emotional drought. So the challenge is, I think, from this story, what is the bridge for you that makes no sense to take the step onto? Or what is the jar that you are being called to give to God instead of keeping it for yourself? What is God calling you to give that other people will think is foolish? Or how is God calling you to love that other people would think is foolish? Jesus did give up his life for you and me. That was the ultimate act of love. We are called to love each other like that. It's the loving, selfless community that makes the church the body of Christ and attracts others to the kingdom. So the kingdom of God is wherever Jesus is ruling as king, wherever his subjects are obeying him. If I want to be in this kingdom rather than the kingdom of self, I obey him. I obey what Jesus is telling me to do. I know what he's telling me to do by reading it in his word and through prayer and listening to him. And then I do what he's telling me to do through faith. And then I experience the blessings of the kingdom.